So hello everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us this evening. My name is Shada. I'm an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement, and I'm joined here today by organizers from World Beyond War, the Palestine Solidarity Network, IJV, Latinx for Palestine, and the Venezuela Solidarity Coalition. If you could go to the next slide, Rachel. So, we are holding this urgent movement briefing because we are now in the final stretch before this private members bill comes to a vote in Parliament. We are just under 1 month out, and this is the moment where political pressure either escalates or dissipates. This bill is a concrete intervention into Canada's role in arming genocide and fueling the US war machine. And the government is counting on us to be delayed, to be confused, and we are ensuring that we are doing the exact opposite. And that is why we have come here together today. And if you could go to the next slide as well, Rachel. And this brings us back to Palestine, because the urgency around this bill only makes sense if we are clear about what is actually happening on the ground right now. And there is a growing attempt to frame the moment as if the worst is behind us, as if things have de-escalated, and as if this crisis has passed. And obviously, we know that this framing is false. What is happening right now in Palestine is not a ceasefire. It's not the end of the genocide. Palestinians are still being killed. Gaza still remains under siege. The conditions that made mass death possible still fully remain intact. Weapons continue to flow. Canada has not stopped its arms exports. Export permits remain active. Loopholes remain open. The material relationship between Canada, the United States, and Israel is intact. At the same time, the media has largely moved on. The government has moved on, but we cannot allow that silence to stand in place for accountability. Silence is how this violence is normalized. And our politicians would benefit if we were confused and immobilized, and that is why we have this private membership bill, this PMB. It forces a clear political question inside Parliament, and it exposes the gap between what the government says and what it does, and it turns complicity into something concrete that we can take up and that can be pressured. And what we're seeing in Palestine is not isolated. It's a part of a wider imperial system where the US wages war, and then you have allies like Canada that help supply it. And that same machinery is at work in Venezuela. And that will take me to my next speaker, Gabriel Aguirre, who is a Latin American organizer for World Beyond War. He has been based in Venezuela over the past few months, including during the US January 3rd attacks on the country and kidnapping of its president. And we're so pleased to have him here with us to share some of the context on the ground in Venezuela.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Sada. Thanks for having me, especially for the organizers to this event of the Arms Embargo campaign now. And well, first of all, I will apologize because my English work in progress. But as you say, I'm here in Caracas. As many of you know, the last 3 on January, Venezuela was bombing and attacking by the U.S. government, the U.S. Army. 3 states of Venezuela was bombing in different parts in the early morning, causing many deaths. What's happening today, we can presume that is the U.S. bombed a sovereign country without declaring war, example, committing murders of civilian and military personnel, around 120 people, kidnapping the president of a country who enjoys the diplomatic immunity as a head of a state, broke all the rules of the international law. We can say that there is not more international law because U.S. with these actions broke everything, returning to the law of the strongest, and that's the situation. And the next day, with big hypocrisy, the government of the U.S. says that everything is for the oil, everything is for the vast resource of Venezuela. I can add something more because the U.S. is currently responsible for more than 100 deaths in the South Caribbean. with the extrajudicial executions carried out under the false narrative of the struggle against the drug trafficking and the transnational crimes is a total liar. Okay, we are in front of a new attempts to try to impose once again the doctrine Monroe, especially in Latin Americans, that this doctrine is trying to resume that Latin America is the backyard for the U.S. They now put a new names that they corollary Trump or Monroe doctrines. You know, it's this idea when the U.S. try to in these competitions against China and against Russia to try to retake the control of the all natural resource of the Latin Americans. This day was a very difficult day for our people. I was in Caracas. I wake up with the sound of the missiles and the airplanes flying over Caracas. Some people maybe knows Caracas. Caracas is a small city with big populations. We have around 6 million people living in Caracas. And these actions, of course, was this unproportional. They use around 150 airplanes, not all in Caracas. Some of them was in the south of the country. They use some unknown weapons were used by U.S. weapons that cause serious harm to the populations, including vomiting, headache, and distortion of reality. Not the classic weapons, not only the missiles they use, some now weapons. They launch, of course, a number of missiles, not only against military targets, and that's important to remind, but also against civilian targets with no strategic importance, such as a scientific research center, a study center, and the main core for the country. All of this to demonstrate the power of the U.S. weapons, the power of the U.S. Army, and this highlights the importance of imposing an embargo about all weapons that flowing around the world to continue fueling war. It's important to say that U.S. are trying to impose their power over our country, our sovereign country. We are discussing to maintain Latin America as zone of peace, like was declared in 2014 by the CELAC. Now, the next week, 28 and 29 on January, is a new anniversary for these declarations, because as you know, our people in Latin America is really a pacifist peoples, a pacifist countries. For example, we in Venezuela, we don't wasn't facing any war in 200 years of Republican history. But now we have a kidnapper with the guns over the head of your family, saying, "Give me your resource, give me your money, give me everything that you have, and what you can do with this." Of course, I know there are many questions about Venezuela and about this issue. We have many things to say, but we have only 5 minutes for this time. But I really appreciated this opportunity to work on it and to remind the importance to stop the fluent of the arms, not only to use against Venezuela, is to use to every country around the world, against Palestine. It's about Ukraine. It's about every part of the world, about Congo, about Sudan, etc., etc. and we need is the time to overall and to think, leave to aside our difference for ideological visions, for strategic visions, etc. Is the time to save the world. Is the time to save the life. Is the time to unity. Okay, despite, however, our difference, it's not the time for this. We are discussing that if we want to live in a real world with with a normal life, or if we want to be, I don't know, or to see many deaths with the everything that are making by the U.S. Army and the U.S. government. I will stop here. And
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for sharing with us and showing us what the grim reality of our complicity in supplying this war machine looks like, and that this is not just relegated to Palestine. This is something that is affecting the entire world, and we have to intervene. Our next speaker is Aaron, who is an anti-imperialist activist for Nuestra America, an organizer in the Toronto Latinx community, and a member of Latinx for Palestine and the New Venezuela Solidarity Coalition. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us today to highlight some of the critical connections amongst our movements and key aspects of Canadian complicity.
Well, hi everyone. Good to see such a big audience. And yeah, I'm going to try to focus mostly on a broader context of what the Canadian complicity has been for about 2 decades now, at least as far as I can trace it and as far as we have time today. And I would like to begin by also kind of tracing back to what Gabriel was saying about these instances in which sovereignty is being fought for in Latin America and in the Caribbean context, and then how of course, obviously, the U.S. present throughout like the last 250 years, the Monroe Doctrine, form of like imperialism being projected in the region, but also, or predominantly, especially in our piece, and what bring us together today is the Canadian element. I would say that we can start localizing the Canadian complicity and in this form of what I call a hybrid war against Venezuela, and it's not only specifically about against a political project, but it also ends up affecting the totality of the population. So this process of demonization, particularly ever since Hugo Chavez took power in 1998. First materialized in the coup d'etat attempt in 2002, in which Canada was basically an accomplice by silence, by not denouncing it, by not saying anything about the interruption of the order of international law. At the same time, that period 2002 to 2005, the then ambassador to Venezuela, his name is Alan Kulham. Some of you may recognize that name. Has been endorsing and supporting figures of the opposition ever since 2004, which they've been claiming, electoral fraud and all of these things for 20 years now. So basically, actively using Canadian taxpayer money to mingle in the politics of the country. Also, it's good to recall that. In 2007, there was a oil reform that was carried out by President Hugo Chavez, and this heavily affected both mining and oil interests of Canada. The consequence of this oil reform, which did nothing other than reclaim sovereignty over the resources of Venezuela, which is in line with their constitution and in line with international law, basically produced a reaction in Canadian needs, in the Canadian interest of this nature, particularly when Petro-Canada left the country. But also we have a few, along with Exxon Phillips, for instance, from the US, or Exxon Mobil or ConocoPhillips from the US. But specifically in the case of Canada, the roles of like Crystal X, which has also been having like a really long arbitration with the Venezuelan state, and the assets for the Venezuelan state has been given over to Crystalic, which is it's a mining corporation. Gold interests such as Vanessa Ventures, Gold Reserve, Rusoro Mining, and obviously the figure of Peter Monk, which ever since like 2004 had been calling for the overthrow of the Venezuelan government. This is not of recent. This is not a recent event. Like a prominent voice such as Peter Monk, which is like a bipartisan voice and is integral to the functioning of the Canadian state, has been calling for the overthrow of a government in a different country, right? Well, we can move back to now to 2017. My bad, actually 2009, just to have a quick reference of instances of solidarity between the Venezuela and the Venezuelan people as a whole, and Palestine too, because this is in 2009, in this year, as the outcome of Operation Gaslit, which was like one of these genocidal military incursions in the Gaza Strip. President Chavez decided to break diplomatic relations with the state of Israel, not to ever recover that again. As well with Bolivia was also one of the actors that completely severed diplomatic relations with the state of Israel. And then also just a few months after, this is when Venezuela recognized the Palestinian state. And what this triggered was within the period of 2009 to 2013, through process of regional integration and asserting sovereignty of the continent, Latin America and the Caribbean, it triggered the recognition of the Palestinian state of about 20 more states. The only ones that had recognized it previously had been Cuba and Nicaragua in a different context, in a different time altogether. But after Venezuela sort of took this step back in 2009, then like a watershed moment took place in Latin America in terms of like diplomatic recognition of the state of Palestine. Because we don't have a lot of time, I'm just gonna rush forward to 2017, because this is when the Canadian government has basically prominently led the Lima Group, which a lot of you have heard about, which is, it shouldn't be called the Lima Group, it should be called the Ottawa Group, because it was designed and articulated and projected from Ottawa. Particularly, I would call this a baby of Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland themselves. And this group has been in existence and continues to be in existence to legitimize the Venezuelan opposition. But this is not the case when we think about the oppositions in Mexico, the oppositions in Honduras, the oppositions in Colombia back in the day, right? It is specifically aimed at recovering all this interest that the Canadian state has in Venezuela, to the point of even suggesting the possibility of military intervention as far back as 2017, something that even within the Organization of American States, they couldn't promote. That's the reason why the Lima was created, as to circumvent an already colonial and subservient organization as the Organization of the American States. Within the context of this so-called Lima Group or the Ottawa Group, they also recognized a parallel government. They also recognized a parallel national assembly, and they called for the military forces Venezuela to revolt back in 2019. This also ties into one of the core elements that we have to understand when we talk about the aggression against Venezuela and this ongoing hybrid war, which is the element of sanctions, to which Canada has also been a big player. And despite the fact that you may hear in the media that this was targeted at targeting individuals, the reality is that in the context of Venezuela, an economy that depends so much on oil production, once you target, for instance, the presidents or the vice presidents or the executives of the state oil company PDVSA, then you're incredibly reducing their ability to trade, their ability to sell oil, their ability to even pay their debts. Like a lot of the times Venezuela was able to pay a lot of their debts, but they couldn't even put their money in their financial system precisely because of these sanctions. And just to wrap up, because we're getting closer to the time, Just a reflection about the sanctions, and I'm just gonna cite an academic work by Jeffrey and Mark Weisbrod regarding the effect of sanctions. There's a few out there if you also want to look into them yourselves. But between 2007 and 17 and 2008, they have reported, this has been even published in Lancet, that sanctions were responsible for an excess death of around 40,000 Venezuelans. And this has been repeating throughout all this period. So ever since 2017, when the heavy sanctions kicked in, but sanctions have been around for even longer than that. Just basically think about 40,000 to 50,000 excess death on a yearly basis. Yeah, and then just to quickly finish, we have seen recently the response of the Canadian state to the strikes against Venezuela on January the 3rd. We heard Minister of Foreign Affairs Anita Anand basically that same day calling for all parts to respect international law, which is it's the closest thing to a joke that I can think of. And also the response of Minister Carnage, as I call him, also legitimizing such a strike by questioning, just on the basis of questioning the legitimacy of Nicolas Maduro, right? Which is once again another. It allows for international law to just be dismissed and to acknowledge that the international order that they may call the rules-based order, international law of human rights has been attacked beyond the aggression against Venezuela, beyond the genocide in Gaza. This is what has been broken. And I just want to call everyone that's nearby Toronto, surrounding Toronto, in Toronto, to a protest that the Venezuela Solidarity Coalition is going to be holding on Saturday, January the 24th at 1 p.m. outside of the U.S. Consulate. This is the Venezuela Solidarity Coalition. If you want to look us up on Instagram, we invite everyone to join us and try to get the Canadian state to, at the very least, recognize that something's not correct.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. I would encourage folks to follow the Venezuela Solidarity Coalition and look at all their incredible work and see if you're in the area you can support them. Thank you for detailing how complicit we are. It's genuinely vile. But I'm going to transition us to our next speaker, Rachel from World Beyond War, who's going to be talking about the complicity that we are in the current Carney war machine, and more.
Thank you so much, Shada, and thank you to Ron and to Gabrielle, and to the many hundreds of people who are here tonight. Yeah, it's incredible to be here together, especially that we're coming together in. I mean, frankly, these first few weeks of 2026 have been horrible. They've been really marked by violence, and I think that what we do in the face of that is what matters now. And being together tonight, I think, is just a really powerful step towards really living out our solidarity. And when we say from Turtle Island to Palestine, from Venezuela to Minnesota, like this is what that solidarity looks like in action, and it's really powerful to be here with many hundreds of people tonight live, and I know other people who are joining in other ways. Yeah, these first few weeks of this year have been horrific. As Shada said, bombs are still falling on Gaza, and there's been a renewed bombing campaign on Gaza. And of course, we know, for those who have been with the Arms Embargo Now campaign over the past 2 years and maybe have followed our two recent reports that have really pulled back the veil on Canadian complicity in these literal bombs. What we've shown is indisputable evidence that these bombs that are falling on Gaza rely on ongoing shipments of Canadian weaponry that contains really vital components of both Israel's fighter jets and these bombs that they are still dropping. This includes Canadian-made explosives. This includes TNT that's made in Europe, and turns out it all routes through Canada en route to all the US bomb factories that are still sending Israel these bombs. So Canada is still arming Israel. and as that violence goes through waves of escalation and receding, but is certainly not in any form of a ceasefire. And then meanwhile, as we've just heard so powerfully from these speakers, the U.S. is escalating its global warmongering and has carried out, quite notably, this horrific and deeply illegal in all senses attack on Venezuela. Unfortunately, this attack has not only been, as Aaron laid out, like had some diplomatic and colonial support from Canada in various ways. It also literally relied on Canadian arms exports that were central to the US's violation of Venezuelan sovereignty through these attacks. Like just to name a couple examples, the US military used over 150 fighter jets to encircle and bomb Caracas, and among them notably were F-35s, the world's most advanced fighter jet, and each F-35 contains millions of dollars in essential Canadian-made parts in the engine, in the landing gear, in the nose of the plane. But it's not just the jets, it's the targeting eyes that were used even in the months before to strike Venezuelan boats. And I want to give a shout out to Project Plowshares for doing really excellent reporting that showed that the key sensors that are used to target those bombs and those attacks were made right in Hamilton, Ontario, at L3 Harris Westcam's facility. This is just one example of one piece of Canadian military tech that was able to be identified based on really careful analysis of photos of these attacks, but there are hundreds of examples. And of course, these are actually, I'll give one more example first. And at the same time as all of this is happening, of course, has been ICE's horrific attacks that I know many of us have been watching live stream, and the kidnapping and horrific violence against people all across the United States. At the same moment that a contract has been signed for ICE to purchase armored vehicles from Rochelle, an armored vehicle supplier based right in Brampton, Ontario, that has been protested extensively over the past 2 years because they were also desperately trying to sell their armored vehicles to Israel. This is the context in which we are coming together tonight to try to address this one very meaningful piece of Canadian complicity. There are many pieces, of course, of Canadian complicity in this violence around the world. However, supplying the literal weapons that are being used in this violence is pretty direct and is something that we can do something about. And these specific types of acts of violence are facilitated especially by what we've been calling the US loophole. This is a convenient exemption in Canada's arms export rules for any weapons exports that are going from Canada to the US. Unlike for the rest of the world, where it's certainly not perfect, but they at least have to apply for an arms export permit. They have to say what the weapons are for and what it is. There's time, it's like time-based rules. There's an amount that they can export. Unfortunately, the loophole in Canadian law means that there's no regulation, tracking, or monitoring of any arms exports, or of the vast majority of arms exports from Canada to the US. This is not a small amount. This is billions and billions and billions of dollars of weapons. We don't know exactly how much because there's no tracking and reporting of it. But we know it's over 60% of Canada's arms exports. So this US loophole is one of the key issues that Bill C-233, that I'm going to talk about in a bit, seeks to address. And this is one of the key pieces that we're organizing around now because as part of the broader Arms Embargo Now campaign, we clearly can't ignore all these weapons that are flowing through the US en route to Israel. But our solidarity must also extend, as has been mentioned by our previous speakers, by the other places around the world, by all of the people that we stand in solidarity with who are also being attacked by these Canadian-made weapons that flow through the US en route to them. I think it's also, though, just to zoom out one more second about the political context here, I think it's important for us to note that this aspect of this flow of Canadian weapons is just a slice of the bigger current political picture here in Canada. I think Shada referenced Carney's war machine. Canada is in a really different place in terms of militarism than it was even a year ago. For those of us who, um, hopefully not for many of us, read the several hundred pages of Carney's recent 2025 budget, it was 100% a war budget. There's no real other way to describe it. It featured enormous austerity and cuts to basically everything else. And where was that money going? It was to triple, if not quadruple, Canada's military budget. This is an almost unfathomable amount of spending, the likes of which we haven't seen since World War II. So this is not typical for Canada by any stretch of the imagination. It especially featured a massive escalation of spending on military hardware. So that's buying those F-35s that we were talking about earlier, that the US has been using to bomb Venezuela and that Israel has been using relentlessly to bomb Gaza, for Canada to buy their own versions of those. It's looking like new warships. It's looking like Canada apparently looking to support Trump's Golden Dome, which is a plan to put missiles in space for the first time ever. Can't imagine how that can go wrong. The military spending is 8 times more than housing, 6 times more than infrastructure. So all the things that the government's saying, oh, this is where we're putting our money to, is far eclipsed by militarism. And I mean, every dollar to the Canadian military is, of course, another dollar funding an institution that's dedicated to colonial violence, to imperial violence across Turtle Island and around the world. If we're doing more military funding, that means we're expanding Canada's role as a colonizer, as a warmonger, as an arms dealer, and as a partner to US war making around the world. So, this type of a plan for Canada is a promise of a war filled future. It's a promise of a foreign policy for Canada that's based on ever increasing militarization, warmongering in lockstep with the US. You may hear this being presented as us being sort of defending us from the US, but this military spending is overwhelmingly on deeper military integration with the US. And you can just look at the war machines we're buying to understand that. These warships, these warplanes, the Golden Dome, we could not even use them without the direct cooperation of the US military. Like, the machines will not function without that. So, this is kind of the track Canada's on. I mean, just like when you build pipelines, you're entrenching a future of oil extraction and of climate crisis. You're not buying pipelines kind of just in case. It's to use them. And similarly, the decisions Canada is making right now to ramp up its military budget, to escalate a global arms race, to purchase these new warships, fighter jets, drones, space missiles. This is entrenching a commitment to wage war via these weapon systems for decades to come. I think many of us support the Arms Embargo Now campaign and come from different movements, and people are here in different spaces, but I think there maybe is a shared belief among many of us that militarism is actually not the answer. And it's actually not the vision of the world that we seek, and that the last thing that we need right now is for Canadian weapons to be fueling Trump's increasingly unhinged warmongering, let alone, of course, to continue to fuel Netanyahu's genocide and Israel's genocide. Um, but unfortunately, this historic ramp up of Canadian militarism, this is the new context in which we right now are organizing. Many millions of people are actually represented across Canada between the 450 plus orgs that have signed on to the Arms Embargo Now demand. This includes the country's biggest unions, faith organizations, human rights, environmental orgs. It represents many tens of millions of people across the country between all of those organizations' membership. We're coming together to say no to this, right? And it's been now over 2 years, maybe over 1 year, sort of under the banner of Arms Embargo Now, saying that actually what needs to happen is a complete arms embargo on Israel. That means ending the flow of all weapons between Canada and Israel. No buying weapons from Israel, no selling weapons, no parts of fighter jets, no tiny parts of bombs. Actually, we need to sanction Israel with a full arms embargo. And right now, the step that we need to take towards that is to close the US loophole, to stop one of the major ways that Israel gets weapons from Canada, which is through this loophole of them flowing through the US, unregulated, etc. So unfortunately, this context of Canadian militarism is now the context in which we're trying to change Canadian law to close this U.S. Loophole. And maybe I'll explain the bill a little bit first. I know that some people in the room have maybe been advocating for this bill extensively over the past several months. Some people maybe have been showing up for Palestine in other ways, but maybe this bill is a little bit new. So I'll just really briefly explain that what we're talking about when we're talking about this new bill that we're trying to get passed in Parliament in the next month. This is Bill C-233. It's called the No More Loopholes Bill, introduced by MP Jenny Kwan. It's a private member's bill. If passed, what it would do is it would ensure that every proposed military export permit, regardless of where it's going, including to the US, has to pass risk tests that accounts for the possibility of genocide, of crimes against humanity, of war crimes. Weapons would have to get a permit. There would be no more automatic exemptions if it's going to the US. There would be no distinguishing between an entire armed vehicle versus just the weaponry part of the armed vehicle, or just the explosive inside the bomb versus the rest of the bomb. All weapons parts would count as the weapons that they are, because literally the bomb does not explode without the explosives inside it. The fighter jet does not fly without the engine. It would also make some other tweaks to Canadian export law to increase transparency so that we would actually see the information that the public is owed every year about where Canadian exports go. And it would just more clearly ban any complicity in war crimes and bring Canada more in adhesion with international law that prohibits any exports in any way linked to genocide, to crimes against humanity. So that's what this bill seeks to do, and it would finally close this U.S. loophole that we're talking about, which is letting these Canadian corporations sneak weapons unreported and unregulated to Israel. And it would mean companies like Rochelle would need permits to send armored vehicles to ICE additionally. So as I was hinting at this bill, I want to be honest with everyone here. This is a movement call, and I know the people here have been showing up time and again over the past 2 years and doing everything they can to end Canada's complicity in genocide. And I think it's important for us to be real that this is a more uphill battle to pass this bill than it was even a few months ago, and certainly last year when this was first being started, because now we're not only confronting Canada's complicity in Israel's genocide, Canada's continued arming Israel, we're actually now confronting kind of Canada's primary agenda with Carney's commitment to militarism, to investment in the war machine and in the defense industry. We're much more up against that than we thought we were, and then we would have been a few months ago. That said, as the Liberal government is prioritizing militarization, as they're trying to say, oh, this is the vision and the future for Canada, this is how we're going to build wealth and strength and unity as a country, it's actually ever more important that we do everything we can to put roadblocks in the way of that mission, that we do everything we can to tell the government, actually, deregulating the export of weapons to war crime around the world is the opposite direction that we believe in for this country. And this bill becomes ever more important, not only to end Canadian bombs and fighter jets and weapons from being used in Palestine, but also to end this ballooning and this really commitment of Canada towards a foreign policy based on war more broadly. So, we have got a battle ahead of us over the next month until this bill comes to its critical vote in Parliament. We've got a situation where it's going to be really hard to get this bill to pass. I'm being honest with everyone here. However, there's really important wins to be made here, even if this bill does not pass. And this is a thing that's worth knowing about private members' bills, is that, which just means it's a bill that was introduced not by the party in power, but by a member of parliament from a different party. Even if a private member's bill doesn't pass, if there are many votes for it, and if we can split the Liberal vote here, if we can divide the caucus, and if we can get, we've gotten many Liberals to commit to the vote, if we can get many, many more to, several more dozen, let's say, that will create a situation in the government where even if this bill does not pass, the government will be forced to implement these legislative changes in other ways. And this is what we've seen time and time again with private members' bill in the past. If we can build the pressure, if we can get many votes in favor of it, we're showing that there is an urgent need to change Canadian law in this way, and that can force the government to do it, even if it does not happen with this private members' bill passing. Are we trying to get this private members bill to pass? Absolutely. But I'm trying to be transparent about our theory of change here and about the strategizing that the Arms Embargo Now campaign has been doing with many people all across the country over the past few months to figure out what can we do to change Canadian law in this critical way. And I think it's important to understand that it's a bit more complex than just whether this bill passes or not. With that, I'm really excited to pass the floor to Johanna Lewis, key organizer with the Arms Embargo Now campaign and with the Palestine Solidarity Network, to share a little bit more about how we go from this political moment right now to what needs to happen over the next month until this critical vote on this private members bill.
Thank you, Rachel. Do you mind maybe sharing slides so we can take a look at some beautiful photos of people's actions? And thank you all for being here. It's really exciting to have so many folks gathered to talk in this really urgent political moment. I really appreciate the speakers before me for laying out the stakes of this moment so clearly. And I'm here to talk about how we can take action together now and in the next month to really try to stop Canada from continuing to arm both Israel's genocide and Trump's rampant violence, both abroad and at home, which is what we're seeing right now. So those are the stakes. It's a lot, but there's really exciting opportunities for us to take some action. So I know that many of you have been organizing towards this bill for months, and many of you probably have just arrived, as Rachel mentioned, but this fight is going to take all of us, so thank you all for being here. Last time we gathered with you with our campaign in November, we had just launched a report that Rachel was talking about a bit earlier, full of evidence of hundreds of shipments of explosives and military aircraft parts going to Israel via the US. And we told you to agitate in your communities about this problem and raise awareness about the US loophole, and to start taking action with your neighbors to pressure your MPs to vote yes on the No More Loopholes Act, which is our legislative effort that Rachel described to try to close that loophole and stop that unregulated flow of arms. And many of you have been doing just that. So there are some beautiful photos on the slide here, and you can go to the next slide too, Rachel, that show examples of folks across the country putting up posters and canvassing your neighbors and hosting town halls and protesting outside of MP offices and doing phone zaps and email actions. And I know many people here have already been working really hard to try to push your MPs. And momentum is really building. It's really, so exciting to see increasing actions happening, and it's having an impact. So our government, as Rachel said, Carney's kind of leaning all the way into militarism as our primary national agenda, and they would really rather that this bill just kind of slip by unnoticed. And we are making that really hard. Cumulatively, all the work that folks like you have been doing across the country are really agitating and forcing MPs to pay attention is having an impact. We're hearing from kind of inside sources that many MPs in the Liberal Party, especially across the country, are reporting back to their own leaders that their constituents are paying close attention to this bill and that they're, hearing expressions of support from folks in their ridings. So the Liberal leadership is feeling the heat. And that's really thanks to the work that all of us have been doing and really matters. We're now in kind of this final sprint moment. So this bill is coming up for a key vote. We're not exactly sure what date because Parliament is a little slippery, but we think probably the last week of February will be a key vote that could allow this bill to pass on to the next stage in Parliament. And that gets us that much closer towards changing Canadian law to close the US loophole for once and for all. So in this next month and a little bit is a really crucial time for everybody here to be getting out there in your communities, talking to as many people as possible, sending emails to your MPs. Now's the time for phone zaps, right? Now's the time to be knocking on the doors of our MP offices and becoming best friends with those staffers, right? We're going to be talking to them as often as possible, making it really clear that, you know, the Canadian public won't stand for this kind of ongoing Canadian complicity in some of the most egregious violence of our time. It's like unacceptable. It's also time for us to really crank up the pressure, especially leading up to this crucial vote, with a big, coordinated, visible push. And so tonight we are launching a day of action to close the loopholes, which is an exciting, coordinated tactic that we're all going to hopefully take part in. The day of action will be on February 17th. Thanks, Rachel. So February 17th is about a week before we anticipate the vote on this crucial bill. And it's also a week when Parliament is not in session, which means that our MPs are back in our ridings. They're supposed to be listening to their constituents, right? And that's a great chance for us to reach them really loud and clear with a clear message from the people, from our communities, from us and our neighbors who are concerned about the state of affairs and want to change things. The stakes have never been clearer. As folks have laid out on this call, Canada cannot claim to support international law while it continues to fuel Trump's unabashed warmongering and Israel's ongoing genocide. So we really have to make that as clear as possible for our MPs. And our plan is to try to force them to pick a side. So that's the messaging that we're leading with. Will our MPs keep arming genocide, war, and state violence? Or will they take a stand for human rights and international law by breaking rank with Trump's war machine and closing the US loophole? We're really trying to make that choice as unignorable and undeniable as possible so that MPs feel that their vote on this bill is being scrutinized by their constituents and has this, as it is, right? It is a bigger choice. It reflects where their allegiances are in this world, in this moment. And so we need people across the country, all of us, hopefully on this call, to start taking action, to get organized, to get ready, to get our groups on board, to find our buddies, and to get ready to host a action on February 17th. It'll be on that same day across the country. We're going to hit as many MPs as possible with coordinated visuals that you can see. I did this mock-up in Canva, so it's not very exciting, but you get a sense from the slide of what these actions could look like. It could really be half a dozen folks gathering outside of an MP's office with these visuals, or it could be, 100 people. Either way, these actions are going to feed into a really powerful national story right on the eve of this vote. We're going to force the media to pay attention. We're going to force our MPs to pay attention. And we're especially going to force the Liberal leadership to pay attention to the kind of widespread public pressure to close that loophole and really stop that unregulated flow of arms. So Rachel, do you mind just sharing, going to the website for 1 second so I can show everybody our toolkit? I don't know if folks here have done a day of action with us before. Feel free to say so in the chat. I'm sure there are some people who've been with us from the beginning and maybe have done our days of action before. But if you go to our website at armsembargonow.ca/no more loopholes, there is, I see a question in the chat about, and we'll get to that in just 1 second. But first I'm going to just ask you, Rachel, to take a look at that blue organize button, February 17th day of action. If you click on that button, you will be directed to a brand new day of action toolkit that we've prepared for you that has all kinds of steps and resources and templates to help make this as easy as possible for folks to organize. So think about groups in your riding, think about neighbors you might call upon to collaborate with. We've got, and then bring this toolkit, to those collaborators and start planning your action. You can see we've laid out a little bit of a preamble that kind of covers the content of this call and lays out the stakes of this moment and what's possible, the opportunity of getting this bill passed. Can you just scroll down a bit, Rachel? And you will see a step-by-step guide of how you can organize a pick-a-side day of action in your own community at your own MP's office. So again, it's about finding your people, claiming your MP, and we'll talk a little bit in a second about how you can find out where your MP stands and adjust your plans accordingly. You'll want to register your day of action with us. There's a link here in this, thank you, Rachel, here in the top of the toolkit there, where you can tell us which MP you're targeting. And if there are multiple groups of people who are aiming to go after the same MP, we will connect you with each other so that you can collaborate. The point here is really to reach as many people as possible, especially some of our key targets who we think are swayable. And again, we'll come back to that in a second. Can you keep scrolling down? Awesome. We will help you with social media templates so you can promote your action. You can prepare your materials. So we're asking folks to print as big as possible versions of these 3 kind of key visuals. This will be, again, coordinated across the country. That makes for a really compelling story. It makes for a much more compelling media hook, and it really helps MPs feel a coordinated pressure upon them. So this is the kind of pick a side messaging that we're going with. We're trying to lay out a choice between voting for international law and human rights or for genocide and war crimes. That's their option. We've got tips about media. We have a handy script for you if you keep going down. You get an idea of what's in this toolkit. Great. Okay. So hope folks are feeling ready and starting to think about who they might organize a day of action with. Now, Rachel, do you mind going back to our website for one quick second? Because I also want to launch another important tool that we are releasing for the first time tonight, and that is our MP tracking tool. So thanks to the insights of all of you who have been emailing your MPs and meeting with your MPs for the last few months, and to many of our allies across the country, we actually have a sense of where MPs are landing on this particular bill. And if you see this in yellow here, MP Vote Tracker, that's where you can find our new tool, where if you put your postal code in that little box, it will call up your MP and share a little bit, it's not super detailed, but it's at a high level where we think they might be landing. Okay, so Rachel just put in a postal code in Davenport. So MP Julie Zarowitz may be considering supporting the bill and is a key MP to target. So if you see a message like this, that means your MP is swayable. We think, based on the information that we have access to, that this is somebody who might be forced to move. It doesn't mean they're like our friend or ally. It means that we might be able to push them to vote yes on this bill. And as Rachel said, that splintering the Liberal Party is like so key. Every vote in favor of this bill is a step towards regulating our arms trade. Those are really important wins. If you don't want to put your postal code in, or if your postal code calls up the wrong MP, which happens especially in rural ridings, you can click on this riding name button and then type in your riding name instead, and it'll do the same thing. There we go. Amazing. Okay. And I see a question, Steph, in the chat saying, how can we provide updated info about our MP? You'll see a little gray button at the bottom here. So if you have received an email from your MPs telling us something else, let us know. We will be updating. This is a movement tool, right? This is a way to support all of us to try to navigate these waters and flip as many votes as possible in the coming weeks. So please let us know. We hope to see more and more MPs shifting to our side, and then we'll be updating on the back end of this tool in the coming weeks. You'll also note on this tool a contact info button right next to that photo. Awesome. If you click that, it will bring you to the contact info for your MP. So I would love for everybody to take a look at this tool, and I'm going to pass it on to Sadie now to tell us how we can take action right now before we wrap up on this call. But again, thank you all for coming, and we hope to see as many Day of Action registrations trickling in the coming days and weeks as possible. We are here to support you. I'm going to throw our email address in the chat as well. So if people have any questions about the Day of Action or questions about resources you might need to help make this happen, you can get in touch with our campaign organizers that way. We really need everybody on side in these next crucial few weeks. This is our last chance to push as many votes to that yes side as possible, and make sure that our MPs know that we are watching them and we are here. Stand up for justice and make them do that too. So I'll pass
Can
it
I
to
just
Sadie.
jump in with one really quick thing first? I just want to make sure people understand this email button here, it will depend on your MP. So MPs like Julie Durwitz are going to get a certain type of email template when they click on here, pushing them to vote. If you have an MP, I saw someone in the chat said that they're in Jenny Kwan's writing, or another who introduced this bill, or another MP that we know supports the bill. When you click on this button underneath your MP, it'll give you a different email template that thanks them for supporting this bill. That's really important because MPs are getting not just pressure from us, they're getting pressure from lots of other people to rescind their support for this bill, to no longer vote yes for it, even if they've said they will. So I just want to highlight that it's really important. Johanna hinted, and the toolkit really gets into detail that there are some MPs that are really strategic to target for the day of action and some who are less so, but all are really important to send this email to, and that everyone should just go ahead and do because it takes 1 minute and it makes a real difference if their inboxes are all flooded with these customized emails about this. Sorry to interrupt, and I'll pass it over to Sadie with IJB now.
All good. Hey, everyone. I'm Sadie Epstein-Fine, and I'm the campaigns coordinator at Independent Jewish Voices. And, just as they were talking about, the people against the bill, I'm like, as someone who works for IJV, I'm well aware of the Israel lobby that is pushing very hard against bills like this. So it's more important that we are pushing back because we definitely outnumber them. Okay, so now is my favorite part of this whole hour together, which is when we take collective action, and I feel so lucky that I get to lead you all through it. I'm also a little nervous myself because part of this collective action is a phone zap, and I'm going to be like live zapping for you all, and I've never done that. So I'm stepping a little outside of my comfort zone, and I hope that you guys all do too. So right now on this call, we are going to call our MPs, and we are going, and basically we're going to use the same messaging as the day of action, which is, which side are you on? Pick a side now. Do you want to be on the side of international law and human rights, or do you want to be on the side of war crimes? In case you don't have it, here are the links to find your MP number. It's both in French. Oh, wow. I'm notoriously tech challenged, but oh, here we go. I'm doing it, everybody. There you go. I think I shared some links. Yes, I did. This is where you can go and find the number for your members of parliament. On screen soon, we're going to have the phone zap script. It's in English right now. There will be a French one coming for those of you who are French speakers. But there is a French website link there. Let me see if there is anything else more that I need to share. I do want to emphasize that if we all make calls now, some people have, but right now there are 384 people on this call. 384 calls across the country is powerful, So I'm really hoping that all of you, if you've never called your MP, guys, you're going to get a message. It's the end of day. So, that's a good first step. If you've had many conversations with your MP, like I have, Julie DeBrusen, we go way back, then, you're a regular. Okay. And so I think we should put up the script now. And I'm going to make a call, which is demonstrating what you all are going to do after I get off my call. I have her number plugged into my phone already because I didn't want to have to take that extra step. And I'm going to go a little bit off script again, just because I've talked to Julie several times over the last year, and she is just very familiar with my voice in her answering machine.
You've reached Julie DeBruson, Member of Parliament for Toronto Danforth. I'm sorry that we can't speak with you right now, but if you please leave a message with your name and number, we will be in touch with you as soon as possible. Bonjour, vous avez rejoint Julie DeBruson, députée pour Toronto Danforth. On ne peut pas vous parler tout de suite, mais si vous nous laissez un message avec votre numéro et votre nom, on vous rejoindra le plus tôt possible. Merci.
Hi, Julie. This is Sadie Epstein-Fine. We have talked several times over the last couple years. I'm a Jewish resident of Toronto Danforth. And as you know, I'm very, very concerned about the genocide that's happening right now in Gaza. But right now, I'm calling you about Bill C-233, which is the No More Loopholes Act. And I am urging you to vote for this bill in February, right? So as we know, as this bill is going to close the U.S. loophole, so it's going to stop the unregulated flow of arms from Canada through the United States. And so right now, Julie, it's time for you to pick a side. Are you going to pick the side of international law, of human rights, of transparency, of stopping a country who is currently committing a genocide? Or are you going to choose the side of complicity in Trump's war crimes, the bombing of Venezuela, of ISIS violent attacks, and as I have spoken to you before, of Israel's genocide in Gaza? So, Julie, if you think through your long career, do you want to be remembered for choosing the side of war crimes? I don't think so. So please, Julie, when this vote comes in February, I urge you to vote with the people who want to stop war crimes from happening. So I would love to talk to you about this bill. So please call me back. I muted myself because I didn't want you all to hear my number. I didn't want to share it live on Zoom. Sorry, y'all. I don't expect her, although you know what? She might have my number honestly saved at this point. She blocked me once from going to one of her anti-Semitism events. I was like, hello, I am a Jew. I too care about anti-Semitism. So as you saw, I positioned myself because Julie is Jewish and she hosts these anti-Semitism events. And so I know that she needs to hear from her Jewish constituents who do not believe in genocide in Gaza. And so that's why I say that. I urge you to position yourself or to use whatever you know about your MP as you're calling to make it personal. As you saw, I get very passionate when I'm talking to Julie. So do whatever you want. I'm gonna give us 3 minutes. I think we should all come on camera, right? We can all go into the meeting where we see everybody. Please, if you can turn on your camera, it would be so great. Because then we can, like, as you saw me, we can all see each other like live making these calls. It's like we're together. That's the point of taking these calls. So oh my gosh, the screen is getting bigger. It's so good to see your faces, familiar faces that I have seen before. Oh, one of my parents is on this call. So nice. Hi. It's really nice to see you all. Okay, I'm gonna mute and I'm gonna put a 3-minute timer on and then we'll be back. Okay, everybody, I'm kind of sort of quietly and slowly come back on because I see some of you making calls. So maybe just mute yourself if you're still making a call. Thank you so much for doing that. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. So beautiful to see you all making calls. I'm gonna hand it back over to Shada to close us out.
Thank you, Sadie, and thank you everyone for calling. Make sure that you keep calling. Thank you to all of our speakers tonight, everyone who joined us and took action during this call. We are now entering the final weeks before this PMB comes to a vote, and whether or not this bill passes, what matters is the pressure that we apply right now. Every call, every office visit, every public action makes it harder for our MPs to claim neutrality, ignorance, or distance themselves from the consequences of their decisions. In the coming weeks, MPs will have to decide whether they will continue enabling genocide and war, or whether they are willing to break rank and be held accountable. And our job is to make that choice unavoidable. So the tools, the resources, and next steps are all shared here. Use them, share them, organize with the people around you. Our political force comes from an organized group of people who apply sustained pressure. So make sure to do that. Thank you again for being here, for taking action tonight, and for staying committed, whether you've just joined us today or you've been with us this entire time. We will see you in the streets, at your MP offices, and in the weeks ahead. Thank you all so much.